Hello everybody, it's Geekopolis here. So, I'm going to be doing a complete comprehensive list and explanation of the history of feminism, third wave to modern, and how that is translated to what we know today as the SJWs and radical feminists. So, let's get started, shall we? In this series, this will be broken up into several parts, probably 3 or 4. And I will be discussing, in this video, third wave feminism and fourth wave feminism. I will try to cover as much information about these two topics as I can, but mind you, I will be getting into further detail of the latter, fourth wave feminism, in the second and third parts, specifically relating to the Gamergate situation, that whole debacle, and the ever-present and now infamous Me Too movement. So, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what I will be going over with you all in the coming probably weeks. It'll take me to get all of this finished as a complete series. So, I will be discussing, as I said, the history of the social justice warriors and radical feminists, their ideology, and how they've influenced our society, and whether their influence is a positive, negative, or a mixture of both. The answer may surprise you, but it's heavily on the detrimental side. I will begin with the third wave feminism, followed by fourth. Then, as I've stated in the next installment, I will be discussing things like Gamergate and the Me Too movement, and then I will move on to more concepts, such as the ideas of white privilege, toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, all of these things that they so flippantly throw around with nary a care. So, let us begin. Third wave feminism. This emerged around the mid-1990s, and the whole idea of this came about by the Gen Xers, who were raised by feminists of the second wave, who had just come off of really incredible victories, such as getting more representation in the workplace, more equality in terms of pay, and really being accepted as part of the workforce. So, these women raised the third wave feminists. I'm going to butcher this name, but the founders, as it were, is a woman named Jennifer Berminger, and Amy Richards. Now, the whole idea of the third wave feminism was to focus on dealing with issues of sexism, racism, and classism. As you can see, this really laid the groundwork for what we have now, and how it became this ever-inclusive, identity-based movement, less so based on substance, as was so focal to the previous two waves. I mean, the first wave feminists were literally the suffragettes, the ones who were trying to get simply the right to vote, one of the most rudimentary and basic necessities you need for a functioning democracy. We're a republic, yeah, I know, but representative democracy. But nevertheless. And then second wave was really all about getting women to be more represented and treated more fairly in the workplace and to gain financial independence. This is more about activism in a idealistic sense. Now, there was some merits, of course, like dealing with domestic violence, for instance, is a good cause that they try to champion. But as you will see, every one of the issues that they try to take on is almost a double-edged sword, because in one instance, it's very good. Of course you want to take on these things like harassment and domestic abuse and inequalities. Those things are fine, and those are noble pursuits. However, when taken in their absolute form, they become easily corruptible things. So that is where the third wave feminism and fourth wave feminism really met in the worst possible way. Now, let's take a retrospective look. During the time in which this has happened, because, let's say, the third wave feminist ends in 2012, and that is when fourth wave feminism starts up. So, I will give you a statistic right now. Among women ages 25 to 64 who are in the labor force, the proportions of their college degrees more than tripled from 1970 to 2012. In 2012, 57.7% of women were in the labor force. A clear majority. Women who worked full-time in wage and salary positions had a median usual weekly earnings of $691, which is representative of a 1% of a man's median weekly earnings. Now, allow me to address the pay gap, because this is something that I wanted to discuss in a later video, in part of the series, but I feel like it needs addressing now because of that statistic. So, when they say 81%, the key thing to listen to is median. That does not mean the average or the individual basis. This is a collective number. So the myth that women are significantly paid, what would that would be 19% less than a man, it's incorrect. And it's misleading. The number does exist, but it's not the same as they are getting paid less per person. It doesn't factor in things like overtime, the types of jobs that men tend to do. If a man just asks for a raise and he gets it because he's more bold, he's more ambitious, it doesn't account for any of those things. And that's the problem with that number. There is a gap when you do it similar work to similar skill set and output. That number is around 2 cents. Far different than the 19% difference, which would be 19 cents because based off $1. So that equates to less than $1 a week. Now, is that an issue? Slightly. But it's far less significant than the 19%, that really bold number. You see how again, the disingenuousness of these individuals who try to perpetuate this idea that we live in this patriarchal system that lives to oppress women. Just look at, they're paid much less. So, the problem is only a 2-cent difference, which I will get into at another point, because there is a law in place, signed in the 60s by Kennedy, which prohibits the unequal pay between men and women. I don't know all the nuances of the law. Maybe there's loopholes that I don't know about, etc. But there is a law in place in this country that prohibits the unequal pay between men and women. You cannot discriminate income based on gender. Now, moving on from that point, I will discuss what influenced these feminists, what ideology, what methodology really brought them to this social epiphany, as it were. They are influenced by what is known as the postmodernist movements in academics. Now, postmodernist, that is an interesting term, and I'll explain what that means, because I fundamentally disagree with it as a concept. So, postmodernism essentially means that when you're looking at things, there is typically more than one way to answer it. I vehemently disagree with that. I believe in a universality. There is a singular universal truth that can be surmised based on data and information and facts and science. Now, there is instances where a postmodernist viewpoint can be advantageous, but it typically, at least from what I can tell, is it's wishy-washy to me. It's very hippie. It's like, oh, there's no real truth, man. It's like, no, there is. Now, of course, for instance, an area in which postmodernism can be applicable. I feel like it would be fair if I give an example. Say you're an archaeologist, and you are at a dig site, and you find something. Can you say, without a doubt, that that is something that, say it looks like a key? You think it's a key, but it can be just a necklace, or a necklace piece, or it can be, they could have used it as a small saw. You could think of many different things of what it could have been, but you can never really know for sure. That's where that idea would come from. I disagree. I think there is ways to find out if that was the right thing or wrong. Phrasing or designating of that item, but whatever. And the ideas in which they tried to redefine were things such as what womanhood and gender and beauty and sexuality, femininity, masculinity, what all these things mean. Now, I personally have a problem with trying to redefine everything we consider to be a normality and a, frankly, obvious ways of thinking. It's like you can literally look at someone and tell. You know, if someone looks masculine or feminine. And there's nothing wrong with those things. And that's one of my issues with this. They almost take it like there's something wrong with being masculine or being feminine. There's nothing wrong with these things. But yeah, they're the first people to complain that things are not diverse enough, but yet will complain if it's too feminine or too masculine or not enough or too much, you know? They will never be satisfied. And this is where it starts in the third wave. You can see the cracks forming that really form and coalesced into the fourth wave of feminism and the illustrious social justice warriors, which I will get to that term as in its whole and its origins at when I get to Gamergate. That should be fun. Now, moving on. This is, I am quoting here, in expressing their concerns, third wave feminists actively subverted, co-opted, and played on seemingly sexist images and symbols. Now, allow me to translate what that would mean and where this is going. This is where they start taking imagery and things that people view in their own interpretations and start to put meaning to them, whether it is subjective or not. They will put their own definitive meaning, which again goes against their own postmodernist views. Ironic, isn't it? But they will use that and say, okay, this image, it is inherently sexist, and if you enjoy this image, you are a sexist. They'll do these little straw man arguments with you. And this is where it starts, where the third begins to form into the fourth. When you start telling people what they can and cannot view and enjoy and find humorous or engaging or interesting, that is when you start attacking individuality, and that's the problem. The problem never has been whether you believe that women should not be harassed. Most people believe that, yes, you shouldn't harass people. What most people, I hope at least, do not believe is you must adhere to this set of rules based on our own subjective beliefs, and if you do not, and you deviate from these in any way, you are a sexist, or a racist, or a homophobe, or anything that they want to throw at you, any of the little buzzwords they try to use to drum up support and form their hate mobs. And again, I find the irony in a group that so vehemently despises the evil patriarchies and Nazis and Klansmen for their hatred and bigotry. They don't seem to understand that they are just as capable and responsible for causing hate, just in the opposite direction. You can very easily be racist to white people, or sexist to men. So, when you start trying to bring in your own opinions and dictate to others that should be the only way in which we have a discourse, again, that's a major, major problem. And then you get to the deplatforming, which I'll talk about in part 2 or 3, probably 2. And this is where, obviously it's all leading up to, we get fourth wave feminism. Now, this one I could find a lot less substantive information about. Shocker. The main things I found were things like I've said before, Gamergate and the Me Too movement are the biggest topics in which have been documented. I'm sure I'm going to use other examples because I'm not going to be able to make an entire video with just those two. I mean, I could, but I plan on each of these being around an hour long, so I want to add some more context to it. But I'm just going to give you a quick quote here, and I'll break down the 3 components in which they are discussing. With a focus on sexual harassment, body shaming, and rape culture, amongst other issues, a key component of the fourth wave feminists was their use of social media to highlight and address their concerns. Now, when they say address their concerns, they mean harass people off the internet and levy false accusations at people that are found to be, well, untrue, and their careers still take significant damage from those instances where they are wrongly accused of any number of wrongdoings. So I will now take these into the three parts that they mentioned: the sexual harassment, body shaming, and rape culture. Madonna Marie, here we go. So, sexual harassment is probably the most obvious one to pick apart, because no one, as I've stated before, thinks that, oh yeah, sexual harassment, that is a perfectly fine and legitimate thing to do, and there is nothing wrong with it in the slightest. No one ever thinks like that. And if they do, they are probably in the vast, no, not probably, they are in the vast minority of people. So, the problem, again, like I said before, these are all double-edged swords. Because, on the surface, of course, you shouldn't harass people. But what is harassment? That's when you become an issue. For instance, if I have a definition of harassment, and you have a definition of harassment, and those are not the same thing, we are going to have a hard time just interacting. Now, allow me to give a example. So if a guy goes up to a woman in a bar, and he tries to flirt with her, he compliments her or something, that is not a harassment. If he taps her on the shoulder to get her attention, that is not a harassment. If he gives her a squeeze, hug, that's not an assault. It does become those things when the person makes it clear they are uninterested in the advance. If the person continues to pursue, then it becomes a matter of assault or harassment, which you can take either, if you're in a workplace, you could file a workplace complaint, or in the general public, you can file a lawsuit and have the person be litigated in the courts to determine the consequences for his wrongdoing and the validity in which it occurred. Now, the most important part of this is the distinctions. We have to be able to delineate between what is simple, common discourse amongst human beings and what is harassment. And that is something that has been very much blurred by the social justice warriors. They are absolutists on this. If you step 1 foot out of line, you will be annihilated by their angry mobs of justice. And I'm using justice with quotes. Now, let's see. The body shaming is one that I just think is kind of stupid, to be honest. This is almost like a good, the bad, and the ugly with me, with these three. It's like, the good was the harassment. I mean, I could, well, it's not good to harass. I mean, it's good that they're trying to stop harassment, but just be clear on what it is. This is definitely the ugly. And I mean that not just because it's body shaming. But it's just a dumb point, because what do you mean by body shaming? Like, are you telling me that I cannot have an opinion on someone's body? Alright then, again, this circles back to me not being able to have an opinion that is individual, the whole concept of wrongthink, which is one of the most ridiculous things I could possibly even fathom. But let's get back to the body shaming. If you're a large person, like 300-400 pounds, do you deserve to be picked on? No, not necessarily. If someone calls you a giant roly-poly fat fuck, well, I mean, they're not lying to you. They're being honest. You would be. So, and I'm sure that there's going to be people, well, what do you know? How much do you weigh? Are you a fat person? No, I'm 150 pounds. I'm not a big guy. I'm a normal size guy. But if I was fat, if I was 200, 300, 400 pounds, and someone came up to me and said, hey, fat fuck, you should probably lose some weight, they would be right. You should not take pride in being obese. There should be some shame with it. And let's just say if you're just ugly, or just really thin, we would take it the other direction. Again, you should be ashamed to be very thin. It's not a good thing. It is not healthy. Can you be healthy and be overweight? Possibly. But it's significantly more rare. It's much more... You have much more of a chance to be healthy if you're a more manageable weight. And same thing if you're too skinny. You have to have a middle ground. And if you're just ugly, well, then people are gonna be assholes. That's just human nature. You gotta stop being so sensitive. You gotta stop looking for safe spaces. You gotta face the real world. I mean, think about what the name of the channel's called. Geekopolis. You think I've never been picked on? But I look at it as, oh, they're just being assholes. Fuck them. And if there was a hot chick, literally. Now, what I just said would be considered wildly sexist by these people. You see the problem? We're going to get into the whole them attacking humor in the second one. Oh, believe me, that's going to be a real big chunk. Because the idea that anyone can try and devalue humor of all things drives me nuts. Now on to the ugly. Sorry, the bad. So wrapped up in the ugly, I forgot what I was saying. No, but let's talk about the rape culture. This one, to me, is the most, egregious. So, first of all, you want to know what a rape culture is? Go look in the Middle East, where if a woman steps out of line, it is perfectly within the man's realm of acceptable behavior that he can beat and rape and abuse his wife if she does not do as he says. Now, do all of the Middle East and or Muslim nations practice this? To some degree, yes. Is it an all-Muslim thing? Of course not. I never typically like to deal in overarching absolute statements. At least not ones such as those. So, what I want to discuss now is... What? Alright, take it out. I'll be down there later. Be down there in a minute. Yeah, I know, I heard you. So, the idea that we in America live in a rape culture, it's infallible. I don't understand, it's unfathomable. I don't understand how you could look at this country and think, yep, rape culture is definitely a thing. Let me just give them some credit. Sometimes they do stipulate on college campuses. That makes much of a fucking difference. We do not live in a rape culture, and I'll tell you one major reason why. We arrest rapists. I'll give you another reason. We do not encourage rapists. Have you ever met a mother or a father who taught their son, you know what, rape, let's talk about it, kid. Go ahead and do it. I mean, do you really think that there's people out there that are sitting there, hey, son, come here. No, you're starting college soon, so I'm sure you're going to be doing some raping soon. Allow me to tell you some of my rape stories. I remember this one time I was at a bar, and I was with some of my friends, and we were with this chick, and I dropped a penny on the ground and asked her to pick it up, but that was only a ruse to slip her a Mickey. I'm sure you'll learn these things in time, son. No, people do not talk like that, and I'm sure that's going to be taken out of context somewhere, dear God. But, yeah, no. We do not live in a rape culture. Now, they will cite things like, a lot of rapists go free. Okay, that is part of the problem with dealing with rape. It is a difficult crime to prosecute. The nature of which you can have both ways be difficult. If you know the person, they can make the case, no, she let me. Yes, we had sex, but it was consensual. And then the burden of proof would have to fall on the prosecutor. Where if you don't know the person, well, that's also difficult because you don't know who it could even be unless they catch the rapists. And then again, you can say and make the same argument. Nobody really knows if you know them beforehand, which makes it a difficult case to prosecute. And sometimes good people go to jail for things they didn't do. And sometimes bad people get off from things that they have done. What are you going to do, though? You're going to just claim that we're a rape culture because some rapists go free? Are we a murder culture because some murderers go free? Don't get me wrong, I despise both murder and rape. But I can see that that is not part of our culture in a normal or celebrated way. So that is just ridiculous to me. We live in a culture that has rape, not a rape culture. And allow me to discuss their use of social media. Now, I kind of discussed this a bit already, and when I talked about how they bully people offline, and they use their own brands of justice, as it were. It's kind of in their name, social justice. It must be an irony thing, I would imagine. I'm just kidding, they're irony impaired. And I will demonstrate why in just a moment. When they go out and say things like, your opinion doesn't matter, you're a fucking white man, they can't really comprehend that what they just said is racist. There's people out there in these communities that genuinely believe that you cannot be racist towards a white person. Well, allow me to give you the definition of what racism means, okay? Because for some reason, these people have got it in their head that if you are white, you are totally exempt from being or facing racism. So, with that being said, allow me to give you the definition of what racism is, and you tell me if it says it can't be applied to whites. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. So which part about that really conveys a tone of whites can only do this? I'll tell you, none. So, when they say these things, and they feel so self-righteous, they don't seem to understand that they're doing the very thing that they are so adamantly against. Now, let's move on to another thing where they are a bit hypocritical, and I will discuss hypocrisy ad nauseum at some point, probably in the third. But their use of social media as a weapon. And again, this is coming from a group of people who claim to be so tolerant, which I think every time I hear that is the most ridiculous thing I've heard, because their entire argument is less white equals better. Now, I believe in meritocracy. I can give a shit what your skin color is. If you have the merit to do something, and you've earned something, you deserve it. You can be the biggest prick in the world. You can be white, you can be black, you can be Asian, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Indian, Filipino. I don't care. You can be anything and be a dick. Race matters very little besides the phenotypes in which you find attractive, your own preferences, there we go. Other than that, it means fuck all. So, for them to go on and say, oh, we're so tolerant, but any time a white man speaks up, they are almost booed out, and in some cases literally booed out, of whatever space they are trying to occupy. And this is a problem because, again, if you're going to preach tolerance, and you expect people to take you seriously, it would be nice if you weren't a hypocrite. Now, of course, and that doesn't mean that there isn't white men there. Of course, they're called beta males, or cucks. So, those are the people that they attract. Is that what we want for our future? A bunch of cuckold beta males and that are bowing down to their black and female overlords? Or do you want an egalitarian system where everybody is the same and we base things off merit? I'm going to say I want the latter of that one, because that's what it should be. Your identity should mean absolutely fucking nothing when it comes to pretty much anything besides physical dating preferences. Unless you're fucking the person and you're trying to get off, and you get off by a certain type of person, that's about as much differences in appearance and race really matters. Other than that, it shouldn't play a role in the slightest. Because you can't, obviously, change who you're attracted to. So, it's just that I get frustrated even discussing fourth wave feminism because, mind you, we have barely even gotten started. This is just the introduction to really get your feet wet, really just get an idea. This is the foundation. When I get into the Gamergate and Black Lives Matter and Me Too and all that shit, and what they do with Chris Hardwick and Aziz Ansari, and now Vic Mignogna, which I have a video coming out on him. It's just ridiculous. You know, they have done a tremendous disservice. And I mentioned earlier, is this a benefit or a detriment to a society? And as it is now, on the whole, it is a detriment. There has been things that they have done well. They have shined light on some issues. But again, the more rabid amongst them will use it and weaponize it against people that have done nothing wrong, and they will use it as a crusade. They will use the sins of others to perpetuate their own agenda. That is the singular greatest issue amongst these types of people, because they do not care about the facts of the matter, the reality. Oh, jeez, I must be allergic to their bullshit. Oy. Anyways, they don't care about anything that does not instantly align with their views. And if you don't, they will happily, and when I say this, I mean almost orgasmically, take you out. Like, I've seen tweets, I mentioned Vic a moment ago, these women thrilled, almost freaking putting 3 fingers in themselves at the idea that, yeah, I was one of the people that helped take down Vic. Oh yeah, I got him fired. He deserves to be fired. Oh yeah, I'm like, okay, you're getting a little too fucking excited with this, are you? So this has to come to a stop, and I will use my last video to explain what needs to happen to course correct from this abomination. But until then, I will mention what will happen if we continue on this track. Any sense of individuality that does not align with their beliefs will be swallowed up by the mob. Any idea, the angry mobs of social justice. If you enjoy comedy, it better not be anything offensive. Everybody will have their own personal safe spaces. Any wrong think will be swiftly dismantled, and we will be an oppressive country, and you might as well just get rid of freedom of speech. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. So, this has been part 1 of my 3 to 4 part lecture on the history of the social justice warriors and radical feminists. Alright, if you liked it, please give me a like, give me a subscribe, comment, please. I really want to know what you guys have to say. This one I actually put a lot of effort into, and I would like to hear your thoughts and any suggestions for the next parts of the series. So, with that being said, I am Geekopolis. Thank you for watching. Geekopolis out.